Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of vBrownBag. This evening, we are going to get into how to save millions and millions of dollars off of your AWS bill, assuming you spend billions of dollars on your AWS. Well, we'll see how it goes. We are going to try to set up some savings, teaching you how to get into your AWS account, and prevent some surprise AWS bills with free, simple monitoring. And we're not just talking about billing alerts. We're not talking about just the standard, triggers and everything like that. We're going to get into some weeds here. Chris and I have been talking about this process for a while now, so I'm super excited to get into the weeds of this. But before we do, let's do some show notes. If you are in the live studio audience, I will be paying attention and peppering Chris with your amazing, educated, fantabulous questions. If you are on Twitter, I will be watching you with the hashtag @vBrownBag or hashtag vBrownBag. I'll be paying attention on there. So if you want to ask some questions through that venue, I will also be paying attention there. So once again, if you want to follow him, he is CCSDevIO on Twitter. I encourage you to do it. He's got some great content up there, and random other things, as do all normal humans. I highly discourage you from following me. I am @MistWire on Twitter. I have no good things on Twitter. So, and we already have the first question. David Soul is asking, what is AWS? He's being a smartass because he's a community builder. So he already knows the answer to that one. All right, Chris, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Chris?
I'm Ducky. It's the Quiz Squad evening. The Chris Squared evening.
Oh my! Sound like my niece now.
I have a speech impediment this evening.
Yeah. My niece is 2 in a few months, and so she's still in the period of her life where it's twux and quiz and things like that, and it's pretty great.
I have a goddaughter who it's Auntie Kim and Uncle Quiz.
Yes.
So we I've been quizzy for a year and a half now.
That's great.
I think it's gonna stick. It's gonna stick.
Yeah. My brother and I are from San Antonio, so I'm actually Tio. Tio.
Oh,
which is just great. Yeah.
I love it.
Spanish for uncle. Yeah.
I've got some Greek godchildren and people that call me uncle. So I'm Nunos for the Greek ones.
Good one. That is awesome.
Okay, well, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, let's do this.
My headset's dying. Let me get my batteries charged. There we go. All right, my headsets are recharging. Cool, I can see your screen.
All right. So, like you said, we're going to be talking about preventing surprise AWS bills. We're going to talk about some security fundamentals, just because I personally feel like they don't get talked about enough. And some very simple monitoring stuff. Little about me. I'm living in Austin, Texas right now. It's very important, especially for any sort of SREs or other experienced people, to know that I am new to tech. So like it says at the bottom there, I have never pushed a line of code to production. And you should keep that in mind whenever we start looking at my actual code.
This is the best time to do this, though. That's what's going to make this amazing.
I love to hear it. Yeah. All the stuff that I'm going to talk about with y'all, I have run on my own accounts, has been running on my own accounts for a couple months now. Everything works. It's just, you need to understand where it's coming from. I'm a former fine dining waiter. I've worked at a lot of the best old school restaurants in Austin. I was a lawyer for a couple of years, and then I was a COVID nanny for a couple of years. My brother and his wife are both ICU doctors, and I spent most of the last 2 years taking care of my niece that we were just talking about. And actually,
wow, I have so many questions outside of the vBrownBag now.
Right? Totally. Let me see if we can just pause this real quick. This is my niece. So, yeah. We are going to be talking about AWS bills because as a former lawyer, I was intrigued by AWS right away, and thought it was super cool. But as a former lawyer, the idea that you could just randomly be on the hook to a 1 point something trillion company for 5 figures worth of compute because you set your settings wrong was just horrifying to me. And so I've looked a lot into all this stuff. And one of the things that I've learned, you can look at these stories, and if you just search for Reddit surprise AWS bill, tons and tons and tons of Reddit posts will come up. And one of the things that is kind of the common thread through these stories is that they tend to be people who are fairly inexperienced. They tend to be people who did not get the fundamentals right. And if they are devs working for a company, then usually they spun up testing infra and forgot about it. The other big one is getting a managed NAT gateway in play when you didn't mean to. That seems to be the other way to, if you are a company, get a whole lot of AWS bill coming your way in a short period of time. But as you can see, there are a couple really experienced users. Chris Short knows more than I will ever know about ops. His newsletter DevOps is awesome. He's got a great story about his unexpected AWS bill. Troy Hunt was the guy who put together haveibeenpwned.com, and he also has a story about Azure. Those are great if you're interested in reading them. But when you do a search of Reddit, most of the stuff that comes up is people who didn't get the fundamentals right. And this was something that, as a new AWS user who was very concerned about costs, I still didn't find it easy to find these things. And so I wanted to make sure that we talked about them a little bit tonight. The first one is that it's very, very important to turn on two-factor authorization for every single AWS account immediately. I personally feel like this should be a requirement. Essentially what AWS is doing right now is that they're offering about $40,000 worth of free compute just on a line of credit to anyone who has a functioning credit card right now. And so it seems very reasonable to me that in exchange for that line of credit, they would ask you to turn on 2FA. The other thing that I didn't know you had to do was you should use your root account only to create an admin account and turn on the billing access for IAM accounts. I had never heard about this until I started taking an Adrian Cantrell course. So you never want to use root for anything other than things that you absolutely have to use root for. You create an admin account, and then the only other time you sign into root is when you can't do anything else, like when you need to change a password, when you need to do any of those other kinds of things. You should never create root AWS keys. There's no reason for it. That was something that I probably saw a Corey Quinn horrified Twitter post about and just didn't know what he was talking about. But what that means is that the root account there should be no way to get programmatic access to the root account. It should be console only. When you do create a new AWS account, whether root or other one, you should create budgets immediately. There's all these things are very easy to Google. You can do it right away, and it should happen every single time. You should also create a billing alert immediately. I actually just learned about billing alarms today. Again, I am new. Billing alarms may have less than 24-hour latency. So if anyone out there is new to AWS, the 24-hour latency for billing is what creates a lot of these difficulties. So as Corey Quinn has said, billing is very, 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 very difficult and very, 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 very important. And for whatever reason, normal users can expect, as far as I can tell, about a 24-hour period before their billing updates. It looks like billing alarms at the very least update on a 6-hour cycle. I don't know if this means that they have less than 24-hour latency. But at the very least, if you make a billing alarm, then that's going to give you 24-hour latency on a 6-hour cycle, if that makes any sense. So it'll still be looking at your bills 24 hours previously, but it'll update every 6 hours. And then always protect your AWS keys. The really gnarly, a hacker rang up 38K worth of EC2 compute in 24 hours. Pretty much, those stories on Reddit pretty much always come from people who accidentally load their AWS keys into a public repo on GitHub or something similar. And it's truly amazing. I read somewhere that generally, if a public AWS key gets loaded into a public, if an AWS key gets loaded into a public GitHub repo, apparently it will take about 10 or 15 minutes for that account to get compromised.
Yep.
It's really, really amazing how quickly it happens. And so the difficulty and the thing that always kind of freaked me out was this 24-hour latency thing, right? And looking at Reddit, all of the stories seem to revolve around EC2s and Lambdas. Generally, what happens is that as soon as your account gets compromised, hackers will use it to start mining Bitcoin using EC2s probably. Lately, they've been doing some Lambdas too. Obviously, the Lambdas can't do quite as much. I did see one story about they used EKS to spin up Kubernetes clusters.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, which I just read that story recently, and so I haven't sat down and checked out on these monitoring tools how to do it specifically for EKS, and also whether just monitoring EC2s will cover EKS, because I know that with these tools it'll cover Cloud9 and some other, like AWS uses EC2 for a ton of stuff behind the hood, it turns out. And but that's something to keep in mind, something to look at if you're responsible for ops or security for things. So we're going to talk about monitoring tools. We're going to talk about how to deploy those monitoring tools. We're going to talk about a couple automated responses that you might want to consider. Then we'll sum up, and if we've got time, we can talk about daily cost monitoring, which I really like having as well. Are there any questions right now before I jump into the nitty-gritty of stuff?
A couple of shout outs for Cantrell's courses, some here's. Shala
So good.
Is a big fan of them, as am I. I love both Cantrell's and Stephane's classes. So yep,
so
no questions yet.
Awesome. And while we're doing shout outs, I actually really should say that the way I got into AWS was through Force Brazil's Cloud Resume Challenge.
Oh yeah.
And if there's any other beginners out there that are looking for a great way to get into the cloud in general, it's a fantastic exercise. The book that he wrote for it is well worth the money. It's like $20. I loved it, but you can do it for free. You can do it on any of the 3 major cloud providers. He basically just lays out a spec, and then for each item of the spec gives you a starter of learning resources of how to do it. And so it's what I personally feel like there should be a lot more of in terms of resources for beginners. It's a building path rather than a learning path. And it was just an awesome exercise for me.
So for the attendee that was asking for the follow-up, that is Forrest Brazil's book. It's called the Cloud Resume Challenge. If you Google Cloud Resume Challenge, his will be like the first 5 hits. You can purchase the book, or you can go to the website and see it there live. It is a fantastic resource.
Yeah, the whole thing is so well done. He's got a Discord where he's really active. It's outstanding. Can't speak highly enough about it. So
Shala is saying Cantrell, Bonzo, and Forest Brazil are my goats for getting started with AWS.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. Adrian Cantrell, man, he does such a good job. They're really well put together person. Okay. Also, if we're doing shout outs, like the AWS people in general have been incredible. As a former fine dining guy, I'm such a huge fan of hospitality. And like literally every single AWS employee I've ever talked to in any capacity has nailed the customer obsession part. Like it's and I have very high standards for that because of my past work experience. Like they've been incredible, really, really good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Have you been to reInvent yet?
I have not.
It's spectacular. You would super love AWS reInvent in Vegas.
Awesome. I'm really excited for it. If we ever get to a place where I would be comfortable doing those things, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So monitoring. So what I wanted to do was basically the threat model, quote unquote, that I was worried about was that I was going to forget myself, throw my AWS keys somewhere, and somebody was going to spin up a whole bunch of EC2s on my site in like Mumbai or Jakarta or Sydney or something like that, and I wasn't going to know. And because with the billing latency, the 24-hour billing latency, you can mine a whole lot of Bitcoin in 24 hours if you've got your IAC set up and ready to go. And as far as I can tell, these people definitely do. So what I wanted was automatic monitoring of EC2s and Lambdas in my unused regions. The first thing that I found, and the first kind of important premise here, is that EC2s emit an event to the default event bus when they're created. So you can monitor for EC2 creation for free just by setting up a, let me switch here to, just by setting up a event bridge rule. So if we're here, we're going to go to Ohio. Actually, let's do a more fun one. Let's go to Jakarta. And so you want to make sure we've got our rules here. So we've got unauthorized EC2 rule. The event pattern is super simple, as you can tell. The source is AWS EC2. The detail type is AWS or EC2 instant state change, and the state change goes to running, right? That is enough to make sure that in Jakarta, anytime somebody spins up an EC2, this is going to alert. And what it's going to do is it's going to log it, and it's going to hit the central event bus in my home region, US East 1. So we'll go to US East 1. And we'll look at, there we go. It goes to the unauthorized activity bus. We'll look at the rules, and we want unauthorized activity. When it goes to that central bus also logs it. And then anything that comes to this central bus gets treated as unauthorized activity. And obviously, this is another place where you can filter things, right? For me, I've got a personal account. It's all very simple. If anybody's doing anything, I just create this particular event bridge bus just for my monitoring. The targets are two different Lambdas. This is a good example of that I didn't even think of until literally yesterday, of separation of concerns, right? You just want your Lambdas to do one thing each. I had these in one Lambda, and that was not a good idea. One of the Lambdas alerts, and one of the Lambdas destroys all the infrastructure in that particular region. So let me
kill all.
Yeah, kill all.
Nice.
Because what I've done is I've set this up so as to.
Nope, we lost your screen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to. I don't know how to smoothly switch between screens when I'm sharing. So what I wanted to do was just set up monitoring on all my unused regions, right? Because my active regions, I'm fairly active in, and I'm not nearly as worried about them, but the unused regions could go unnoticed by me for however long, right? Okay, so that's how the EC2s work. The lambdas, it turns out, do not emit an event when they're created by default. But you can set config to monitor lambdas, and then it will emit an event to the default bus whenever a lambda is created. And so we can look at that. Let's see if new share is what I'm looking for. It is. Okay, good. We'll go back here. And if we go back to Jakarta, what we're going to find is we've got a rule here that we've got the unauthorized lambda rule. And now see the source, instead of AWS EC2, the source is now AWS config. And it's a slightly different event pattern, but still super simple, right? And still almost free. I want to say config charges like 1/3 of a cent for each recorded event. And so it's very close to free. And so same thing as the other one, you just set your target as your unauthorized activity bus in your home region, and then it works the exact same way as the EC2s from there on out.
Gotcha. Okay.
Super simple, super straightforward. And what you're going to want to be looking at here, let's go to config. You want to make sure when you turn on config to only turn it on for, this is different settings than I'm used to. Let's go to US East 1. Or actually, sorry, let's go to US East Ohio. You want to set it up to only look for the services that you're worried about. In this case, I've got it set up to where it's only monitoring for lambdas, and that's easy to do when you're setting it up. I can't remember how to. Let's see. Anyway, so you want to keep that in mind. When you're in unused regions, it's not a big deal because nothing's happening in them anyway, and AWS or config kind of scales down that way to where when it's not discovering anything, it's not charging you anything. So we'll go back to this. So that's basically how the monitoring works. The tricky part was the deployment. The trouble with the deployment was that I wanted to deploy them in every single region but my home region. And that's not really a thing that people do. And actually, it's really interesting because Corey Quinn was looking at doing this. He had a blog post just like a week or two ago about it. And had the quote, unfortunately, every solutions architect I asked about the best way to proceed to deploy to all regions looked at me as if I'd lost my mind entirely. So I'm just going to say again, I have never pushed a single line of code to production. And if this is a terrible idea for some reason that I don't know about, I apologize and please correct me right now. But I didn't see any reason why it would be a terrible idea. And so so I figured out how to do it. There wasn't, I took a brief look at all the IAC tools, and there wasn't a way that really jumped out at me as being simple and straightforward. And the way that I knew would be simple and straightforward was to write a Boto3 method that deployed it in one region,
Mhm.
and then just loop through it. So actually, let's just look at this in the Lambda. So we're going to go to deploy here and take a little look at it. Actually, I do want to look at it in my, yeah, okay, good. So let's go to monitor. Let's go to deploy monitoring. And as you can see, this was easily the hardest part of this project. Setting up the actual monitoring was really simple. Figuring out how to get the monitoring into every single region took me like 10x longer. So we're starting in our Lambda handler. First, we want to make sure that we're not deploying into the home region, because I do have the kill all method that destroys all the EC2s and all the Lambdas. And I did once, before I thought to put this in, managed to deploy it into my home region, and it managed to delete itself before it, before it
Nice.
stopped. Yeah, it was very, I was impressed. It was very thorough. But what you can see here is response equals EC2 client, describe regions, all regions true. This gets you a list of all the regions. And then you're just going to for loop through it. And you're going to, let's see, right here, deploy monitoring in each region, for region and regions, deploy monitoring in region. And so super simple idea, right? You go to deploy monitoring, and that mainly sets up logs. I've got some pretty verbose logs that I actually thought I had taken out. I apologize for that, and I'll make sure they come out. But
what did you use for your logging?
Just printing to Cloudwatch.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to take it out, because they just kind of clutter everything up, and I know everybody's going to have their own logging stuff. But if we look up here,
yeah, Graham's right. Graham just posted, never apologize for logging. So
oh, nice, thanks.
He is 100% accurate, because I would counter your statement that people put in their own logging with no, they don't.
Nice.
9 times out of 10 they'll forget it if it's already not baked in. So I would leave it in.
Awesome, cool. Well, I'll do that. It's structured logging. It is nested. It's not flat. I've learned just enough about observability to have learned that I needed to make it flat, and so I apologize for that. But it all works. The one main gotcha. Let's switch back to the. Oh, that's interesting. Now I don't have the option of going. We're going to stop share for just a second and go to Keynote. And why can't I? I apologize to everybody. I can't find.
Are you sharing the screen, or are you sharing the windows individually? If you click on share screen, and then just so you got basically you've got the actual apps, or you could just share the screen itself, if that makes it easier for you, unless there's stuff you don't want to share.
No, I'm still new enough that sorry, I'm still new enough to Mac. I apologize, everybody. I've had a Mac for about a month. And
this is the best way to learn. Trial by fire.
Nice, right? Totally. Let's see. I'll say it out loud. Brave browser, Twitter, Notes. Is it calling it Notes? Is that the deal? It's not calling it Notes. No. Let's definitely stop that. And we're gonna go.
Oh, we got some Mac hate in the community.
Man, I feel it. Like I was such a Linux guy, and it broke my heart. But I had this setup on Linux that I really liked that Zoom just did not play well with, and it was really making me crazy. And horrendously, all right, we're just going to do desktop one. Is that working? That's working. Okay, good.
Yep. Mhm.
It was horrendously embarrassing in a couple interviews, and I was like, we're just going to wall it with this thing. Okay, so one important gotcha. You look at the second bullet point here. Resource-based permissions in Cloudwatch for event bridge logging. So if you are new to AWS, sometimes, most of the time, when you're setting up permissions for something, you are giving the thing that you're writing permission to do something. So if you're writing a Lambda, you're giving that Lambda permission to log, permission to write to a database, permission to do all the things, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes, I believe that's called account-based permissions. Sometimes it's the opposite, where the destination is what you need to give permission. They're like a bouncer at a door, and you need to get your little service on the list.
Mhm.
Cloudwatch logging is that way. And so as you're setting all this up and doing all your permissions, you need to remember that, Cloudwatch logging is that way for EventBridge. So if you want to log all this stuff as everything's flowing through your EventBridge buses, you need to turn it on in Cloudwatch and not EventBridge. That was the one time in this project that I got stopped completely cold and like had no idea how to go forward. Oh, another shout out. There is a Slack channel called Hangops that is fantastic, and their AWS channel is incredible. Very experienced people who are very, very generous with their time. Pulled my ass out of the fire twice. Each time did it in like 5 minutes. Cannot speak highly enough about those folks. That is a super, super awesome community. The AWS channel on Hangops. Just love those folks. So deployment, let's go back to the code. How is everybody coming along? Is there any questions I should answer?
There was one question around these unauthorized activity alerts seem very important. Does AWS have some pre-built use/security rules that can be turned on easily?
That's a great question. Not really. What they have built in is, let's go back to the fundamentals. What they have built in are billing alerts and billing alarms. And so the difficulty is that all the billing information starts to show up about 24 hours after it happens. And so any potential attackers essentially have about a 24-hour window to work with if you're only doing billing alerts or billing alarms. A billing alert is something where you set it and you say, my monthly costs should never exceed X dollars. A billing alarm is you can do for estimated costs and just say, if my estimated costs go above this, then immediately alert me. Those would be the main built-in ones. Okay. So we've got this, and we're going to go back to desktop because that's not working. And we'll do this, do this. Oh, did I? All right. I may have X'd out of, there we go. Okay. So when you're doing your monitoring, this is essentially what you're going to do. You're going to set up your logging. You're going to deploy your config, right? Because you have to turn on the config and set it to look for Lambdas, right? There's a couple other things you need to do when you deploy to config. You need to do config response and delivery channel response. Then you set up your event bridge rules. And basically you're doing all the things that we looked at, right? All the stuff that we did earlier. This is how you get them into all the different regions. It's a pretty straightforward process. Not too many gotchas. And the Bodo 3 docs, if you're new, are a fantastic thing to learn on because they don't have any examples, which was very difficult for me. But what they do have is that all the naming is done very well to where once you get it only takes a little bit of getting used to it to get to the point where you're like, I think I probably need something called get item. And then you look it up and get item is right there, which is just an awesome experience to go through in terms of getting out of tutorial hell. So, all right, we're going to, now I know what we're doing here. We're going to go that, and then we're going to go here. Oh, come on, baby. I bet it's this. No. So, apologize for the lack of smoothness, everybody.
No, this is great, dude. No worries.
Okay, thank
I
you.
like the background.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go Keynote, File, Open Recent. There we go. There we go. All right, thank you. Okay, desktop. And so that's the main thing about deployment. Can everyone see my presentation again? Are we back to that? Okay, yep. Thank you. The other thing to consider is a response. So I talked to Tim Banks, who's he works for Duckbill Group, and he's brilliant, and he's incredibly experienced sysadmin, and was very generous with his time. And he said, you know, you probably already know what you want your initial response to be, and so rather than just alerting straight to PagerDuty and waking you up in the middle of the night, why not just do some mitigation? And it turns out that that's easy to do. So now we're getting into the alert and the kill all lambdas. So what you do is you just create an unauthorized activity detected event. All right. And then you do alert. My mitigate is called kill all. But the key is just to keep in mind that you can make your response to the unauthorized activity detected whatever you want it to be. So what I did was, let's see if we can switch back here real quick. We're gonna go like this. Okay. So that paused the screen sharing. We're gonna go back to the desktop, and there we are. So what I did was create an alert function that does two possible things. On the first time that something that unauthorized activity is detected, it just alerts through email, because the idea is that the kill all lambda is also going to run, and so it's going to delete everything it finds. And then if nothing else happens, I can just continue to sleep through the night and deal with it when I wake up in the morning. Then the alert method, if something happens a second time, will hit me on PagerDuty. And for those of you that haven't used it, PagerDuty is super easy to work with and a ton of fun. Because I'm new to the industry, I don't have any scars associated with it. And so it's really been very cool to have something that, you know, when certain things happen, it blows up my phone. Their API is easy to work with. There was only one gotcha I ran into with PagerDuty, and that was that on one of them I had to manually, we'll get to that, but I'm getting off a little bit and I apologize. What it does is just, if this is the first unauthorized activity, then you hit the SNS topic of unauthorized activity detected. If there's been more than one detected, then you hit unauthorized activity continued, right? And so UA detected just emails, and UA continued hits PagerDuty. And that's the way that this controls the kind of thing. And I just kept track of it in a little DynamoDB table. Super simple. And so the first time it happens, it emails. The second time it happens, it hits PagerDuty. The other thing that for me personally, it does every time is destroy all the EC2s and the Lambdas. And actually, I should be doing this in this. And now we get to my conversation with Charity Majors, who is amazing. I had a little phone call with her. She also was very generous with her time and also was brilliant. And her advice was that if she were running this, she would run it in safe mode for 2 months if she was running it in a production environment. And so I'm passing that along. Please, 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 if you decide to do all this kind of thing and you decide to do any sort of mitigation step that involves deleting infrastructure, please run it in a safe mode first. What I did to sort of enforce that was just completely separate them. The alert and the kill all Lambdas are completely separate, and you should run them with just the alert for a while to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. What you're looking at here is a Bodo script that gets called. We're setting up logs here. And then you get the list of non-terminated instances by calling all this. I put in a little one to make sure that termination protection is off. Disable API termination is the call there. And then you just kill the instances. EC2 client terminate instances. It keeps track of which ones, keeps track in logs which ones it terminated. Instances terminated is that list. Otherwise, it says only terminated instances found, or 0 instances terminated because no instances were found. And then it does the same thing for the Lambdas. It just goes through and deletes all the Lambdas in the region. Again, super simple, right? The Bodo docs are great this way. It's really easy to go through and find all the methods that you need. There really wasn't any gotchas that I ran into. So, and I apologize for saying super simple. I've seen enough Twitter threads to know better than that. But this part of it was pretty straightforward. And so if you're looking to do this, so let's see if we can get back to the presentation. All right. So that's the response. You can, once you've got the monitoring set up, you can then make the response whatever you want, right? That's the important part. And all you need to do to set up the monitoring is just the EC2s run through the default event bus automatically and for free. If you turn on config to look at Lambdas, then Lambda creation will also run through the default event bus for almost free. And you just set up rules on EventBridge to look for those things. And so what you can do if you're in some kind of a if you're in an actual working shop, or if just your own personal account doesn't use these kinds of things, if there's other things you want to monitor for, it's really easy to set config to just monitor for those things. Oh, one other important thing. So I haven't gotten far. Essentially, this is version 1 of this, right? And so version 2 would do some monitoring in, let's see, version 2 would do some monitoring in the home region. And when you're going to do that, one thing that helps a whole lot is that it turns out, let's see, we're going to do, it's not deploy in home region. It turns out that it may be deploying home region. That EC2, yeah, this is going to be it. When you go to the Photo 3, you're installing the config recorder here. Configuration recorder, name is that, role ARN is that, recording group all supported. You go to resource types, and this is lifted straight off the Photo 3 docs. And the nice thing about this is, if we scroll out, by default in the docs, it's got every single possible service that EC2 monitors. And so what you can do then is just paste all of this in like this, and whatever you want it to ignore, just delete it out. And that's how you can keep an eye on unauthorized stuff in your home region, right? Because like like let's say I've got a simple little app that's got an API gateway and a Lambda and a DynamoDB table and an S3 bucket, right? I can just delete those things out of this huge long list here, and config will not look for those things in my home region, but will look for everything else in my home region, right? And then you're just to handle, like, say, I normally do S3 buckets, but I don't want unauthorized S3 buckets. Then you just set up an event bridge monitoring kind of thing, like we've done, that looks for tags, and you just set up a tagging policy, and you keep track of unauthorized infrastructure that way. Did that all make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
Well, actually, let me make sure. Everybody else, did that make sense? Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're getting confirmations. Okay, good.
Okay. So the main thing that I've learned through all of this, you have to have security fundamentals set up on every account. And the really anecdotally, what I have learned is that for personal accounts, it seems to me like if you do those security fundamentals that we talked about at the beginning of the thing, you're pretty much going to be okay. Don't put your AWS keys in a public GitHub repo. That's the worst thing you can do. Definitely set up 2FA. Not setting up 2FA is probably the second worst thing. Only use a root account for things you absolutely have to. Don't use root keys. Set up billing alarms. You do that kind of stuff, and you really basically are probably going to be okay from what I can tell. These things will help you in the event that something terrible happens anyway. The other thing that I've learned is that for me, the way I now think of it, so I have ADHD, right? And so I expect to forget things. I've gotten to the point in my life where I expect to forget things. And what I have learned is that for the stories where devs or ops folks have spun up huge expensive infra for testing, their problem was that they didn't expect to forget about it. Almost every single time they relied on their memory, from what I can tell. This is just from what I've read. There's a Hacker News story. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick here. There's a Hacker News comment about a startup that got destroyed. Okay. A few years ago, my startup was killed by an AWS mistake that ran overnight. It was an AWS expert. He had made an 80K mistake in the past. He made another 80K mistake. He, as it says here, he ran up a shitload of instances for testing and left them all running overnight.
Oh, geez.
And I've read other stories like that. And so the takeaway that I am going to try and bring with me into any jobs that I might have is that
can you put that Hacker News article back up? I want to get a screenshot of it.
Yeah. Let's see here. We're going to go like this. No, we're not. We're going to go like this. There we go.
There we go. Perfect. All right. Grabbed it. Got it. Thanks.
Awesome. And so one thing that I'm thinking about, that I would want in any situation like that, where I was, say, spinning up testing infrastructure that was going to bill like $500 a minute or something like that, I would personally put it in like Dubai or something like that, and have kill all on a cron job for all the infra that I was running. So even if on top of all the other stuff that I forgot, right? I know that in an hour, there's going to be a kill all Lambda that's going to run and just delete all these things, and all the EC2s that it finds in Dubai, or all the Kubernetes clusters that it finds in Dubai, or whatever it is that I'm using for testing. The other thing that you see a lot, well, not a lot, but the stuff that Chris Short and Troy Hunt ran into was they had large files in S3 buckets that they thought were going to get caught and cached by Cloudflare, and did not. And the monitoring S3 stuff is I haven't figured it out yet. It seems like there probably should be a way to do it, but it doesn't seem easy. And so that's kind of the main stuff we've got. The other thing that's easy to do that I've discovered is daily cost monitoring. And I feel like this would probably be especially nice for a small company, because the difficulty with billing alerts and billing alarms is that they have to do with monthly levels, right? So when you set a billing alert, it's like, I don't want to pay any more than $500 for my AWS bill this month. Send me an alert if I go over like 50% of that, right? You can set your alert for 50%, 80%, 20%, whatever you want to do it. Well, the problem is that then you're getting multi-day latency for whatever it is that you send, unless you set it for 1/30th of the amount that you've got the alert for. And so one easy way around it is to just set up daily cost monitoring. And the way you do this is through the Cost Explorer API. And you just use the API to pull the previous day's costs. You compare it to your level of acceptable costs in a day. And if it's over that, then you could email yourself. Some people email themselves every single day. Hey, here's the cost we racked up yesterday. I personally worry about alarm fatigue in that kind of situation. I know that after like 8 days, I'm not going to be opening that email. And so for me personally, what I've got it set to do is I email if it's higher than X, and then I actually alert through PagerDuty if it's just higher than X. But you could also do a graduated thing where, like, if it was $100 yesterday, then it emails. But if it was $300, then it goes ahead and alerts and hits you on PagerDuty. And that is also something that is pretty straightforward to set up. If you are interested in the code and you're not worried about the fact that I have never committed a line of code to production in my life, this is where you want to go. It's github.com ccsdev.io safe for AWS.
I put the link in the chat already, and cool. I'll have it in the show notes as well.
Cool. And that last one is going to be, it's under the Cost Explorer. So we've got daily cost monitoring there.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's gotten to a point to where I've been pretty happy with it. The main thing for me was just doing the deep dive. And honestly, the thing that helped me the most was getting the really strong feeling that if you just do the fundamentals, you're probably going to be okay. If you're talking about a personal account, if you're talking about a work account, the main other thing to keep in mind is developers spinning up infra and forgetting about it. And I think the two main things on that are to do your daily costs alerts, and also to have things in place so that people don't expect to remember, right? Do some kind of thing where you've got an automated monitoring system for test infra. Like what I'm thinking of is like the Hacker News article, he was expecting to run the test infra for a matter of seconds, right? And so if I were in that position, I would set the kill all lambda for like, 20 minutes, right? So if he's thinking it's going to run for less than a minute, that still gives him 20x worth of space. And I'm just going to run that lambda every 20 minutes, like all night long until I get back to work in the morning. And just stuff like that, where people are not expecting to rely on their memory.
Yeah, people like Sean Doyle would never do anything like that, would they, Sean? So Sean had to call AWS and beg out of an exorbitant bill last year. So I'm making fun of him right now.
Yeah,
and he can't respond because he's on mute. So
yeah, it's my nightmare. Oh, and this is a shout out I should have said very much in the beginning. On top of AWS employees being great every single time I have talked to them, almost every story that I've read on Reddit, and I read a lot of them, the billing department in AWS is consistently amazing in terms of being forgiving of one-off. This has never happened to me before. I don't know what to do. AWS is incredible of taking care of people in those kinds of situations. As far as I can tell, it will be painful. There will be some bureaucracy that you need to deal with, but they seem to consistently take care of their customers and do a really good job by them.
They do, but this comment was something that Corey Quinn made when we interviewed him a while ago, and I haven't played with it, so I'm not sure how it works. But on GCP accounts, you actually so GCP free tier, you cannot screw yourself.
Yes.
There's guardrails around it so that you can't accidentally get a $600 bill.
Yeah, and I think that I have heard that as well. And then also, if you read the Troy Hunt article, the Microsoft billing alerts seem to happen in real time. And that's the other thing that can really make a difference in these kinds of situations. And I think also, speaking of, the other thing that AWS does not do is that even if you hit your billing alarm, it doesn't shut down your account, right? But you can make your account to where it effectively shuts down. So one of the things I've got in this repo is a circuit breaker that just deletes the API gateway when it gets triggered. And so the idea is to avoid like a Reddit hug of death or something like that. But you can do things like that. There's actually now an API call for close account. That if you're in an organization, if you're running an organization, you can shut down an account through an API call.
Have a trigger for those dev accounts that go, oh, $5,000 and close.
Yeah. Speaking of, Tim, one of the things Tim Banks talked about is that one of the things you can use monitoring to do is you can set up a tagging practice with a hash or something like that, so that just anytime somebody creates infra through the console, it gets automatically deleted. And so you can enforce an IAC policy automatically in your organizations using that kind of stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
It definitely is. He actually mentioned that when we talked to him a couple months ago.
Nice.
It's a very small world, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So Dennis says thanks. People are commiserating about bills, but I don't see any other questions. That was awesome, dude. I can't wait to wade into the code in the GitHub repo and just start hacking away at it.
Cool.
How did you hide your secrets for your PagerDuty API calls? Did you put them in parameter store?
Let me see here. Oh, PagerDuty. So PagerDuty just hits a. I may be just wildly insecure here. Unsecure.
Oops. Did you put
Right?
your API
Totally.
here?
No, PagerDuty just alerts to an endpoint.
Oh, so you don't have to, there's no API secret keys to hit PagerDuty?
Let me see how we're doing here. Let me, sorry, now I'm trying to find Zoom again so I can share my screen.
Oh, Graham, bad
There we go.
question. What's the matter with you? He asks, can you automatically terminate the developers as well? No, Graham, you cannot. You live in the UK. You know that you guys can't get fired or killed. That only happens in the States.
So, so here's my unauthorized activity continued that hits PagerDuty, and it just goes to this endpoint here, and yeah, I mean,
I thought I must have misheard. I thought you said you used an API call from within your Python to do it. You're just going to that HTTP endpoint.
Yeah. It just I just hit this SNS topic, and the SNS topic targets email and PagerDuty, and so that's on the continued, right? And I've got detected, which is the first one, to just do email, right? Because the idea is the first time it happens, it's just going to delete everything, right? And second time it happens, it means that someone is being determined about it and it needs a human response. Oh, and the other thing that I forgot to say is that I personally have it set up to delete all AWS keys for all users if unauthorized activity is detected, which I personally works really well for me.
Is that in kill all as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that really works for me for a personal account. It's obviously massive overkill for any sort of production account, but it is possible to do, and it's not hard.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, for user and users. For users. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, this is going to be fun to dig through, dude. I'm excited.
Oh, awesome. Right on.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, answer question. David's what is AWS question was answered. So, and everybody else's was as well. I've got the links to all of the references, and I think I covered everybody in the shout outs and Twitter. So I think we're good.
Awesome.
Chris, this was super fun. Thanks for coming on the show tonight.
So much fun. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. we appreciate you coming on. Okay, everybody, thanks very much for coming tonight, and we will see you once again next week. Have a great night.